Alright, what's going on, guys? This is Mariano5 for Raise Your Edge, and I'm here with FaLLout86, also for Raise Your Edge, and today we're going to discuss a hand I recently played at the 1-3 tables, so let's just get right into it here. We have a loose passive player limping, and an aggressive semi-reg comes in for the raise. This guy was raising a lot, really wide range, calling 3-bets really wide, just playing really loose, aggressive style. So, first decision here, what do you think we should do, FaLLout? Do you think we should flat call or 3-bet this hand?
Yeah, I think in general, people flat call way too often in those games. So I think a 3-bet is definitely in order to isolate the aggressive player. Also, what's important here, we are fairly deep. And of course, the deeper you are, the more important position will be. So we have a huge advantage when we are in position against a weaker opponent and deep. So yeah, I think I would always 3-bet King 10 suited in this exact situation.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. So I went for the 3-bet. As you say, isolating these weaker players always good. Because the thing is, if we flat here, we also invite all the players behind flat, and it's even though our hand's going to be plus EV, of course, but you don't. I'd rather play heads up than going like 4 or 5 way, because in that spot you just basically have to hit to win. So taking the aggressive route is always going to be good in these games. So we flop pretty good. He checks it over. What do you think about on this board as our kind of overall strategy?
Yeah, I think this is definitely not the best board for our range, because we are not 3-betting 7s, we are not 3-betting 6s. We are definitely 3-betting jacks, so we have the nuts on this board texture, but he still has hands like 7-6 suited and 7s and 6s. So yeah, I think we should definitely bet polarized on this board texture and don't bet every single hand from our 3-bet range. So we should bet some straight draws, some flush draws, some strong hands, and have some strong hands in our checking range as well. This would be my strategy on this board texture. So a hand like King 10 suited with spades or hearts is definitely going into my flop betting range. Yeah, what did you do?
Yeah, I went for the bet. I bet about. Oops, sorry. Jeez. I bet about. I guess about 40% pot or so, which I think is fine. I think you could go even bigger, as you say, because I will be betting somewhat of a polarized range here. Even though his range is pretty wide, I think, as you say, we can just check back kind of medium strength hands a lot. Maybe hands like, say, 9s, 10s, maybe some weaker Jack X. If we have a hand like Jack 10 suited, I don't mind checking. And then even some stronger hands sometimes. But yeah, as you say, betting pretty polarized. So obviously this hand works pretty well in there. We can always call check raises, and then, we can barrel a lot on good turns. So went for the bet and sized up just a little bit. I like to go maybe a little bit bigger, but it should be fine. And he actually comes in for the check raise here, so a little bit surprised. Now I'm kind of thinking he's got obviously hands like 6-7 suited, pocket 7s, pocket 6s. He can still have jacks. And then he can also overplay hands like ace-jack, king-jack, which, although they're not the worst check raise, probably should just be check calls here, but I definitely wasn't eliminating those from his range. So what do you think versus the check raise as our play going forward here?
Yeah, I think we have a pretty decent hand, not a very strong hand, not a weak hand, just a decent hand. And we definitely have a lot of implies. So like you mentioned, aggressive players tend to overvalue top pair type hands. And like you mentioned, even with ace-jack, sometimes they're going nowhere, even this deep. So I think it's definitely a terrible decision to 3-bet on the flop. Then we are just getting it in against 6s, 7s, jacks, maybe ace-jack from time to time. But against all those hands, right, we are a huge dog. So we should definitely call here, continue, because we have position. We have a lot of implies. Even the king could be good when he raises hands like ace-jack on the flop. And of course, he can also have a bunch of draws, like spade draws, like straight draws, depending on how wide he's defending pre-flop, hands like 4-5, hands like 8-9, and of course spades. And yeah, this is why I think our only option is to call here.
Yeah, for sure, which is what I did. And then, as you say, if we shove here, or if we re-raise, really isolating ourselves. And aside from his value, I think the draws that he's going to get in, occasionally, yeah, he could have a hand like 8-9 spades, but if we get all the money in versus a draw, he's mainly going to have the nut flush draw, in which case, you're really smoked. So obviously, if we have the nut flush draw here, I would still be calling, but at least in that case, you could consider re-raising, because then at least you're dominating all of his worst draws. But you want to be careful this deep. If you're shallower, fine, you can stick the money in. If we both had $500, just stick the money in and expect to be ahead of a decent amount of draws. But when you're this deep, even against these kind of aggressive players, you got to be a little bit careful. So definitely call in here. And then the 8 of clubs on the turn. All right, so the 8 of clubs on the turn obviously improves our equity a little bit here, picking up the gut shot. And now he comes out betting for a fairly sizable bet, I guess somewhere around 60%. So Obviously, another decision at our hands. What do you think? Do you think we should be shoving this, calling, maybe folding even? What are your thoughts here?
I think it's important to go back to the flop, which range we assigned our opponent. So we gave him some draws, 4-5 got there. 8-9 is probably not betting the turn all the time because he picked up some more equity, and questionable if he is continuing with this hand. And it's basically pretty equal to the flop. When we shove, we just isolate ourselves against a stronger range. So yes, we picked up some additional equity, but he's still not folding a bunch of better hands, even when he's betting hands like ace-6 and spades on the turn. Questionable if he folds those hands to a jam. So I think, keeping ranges as wide as possible and calling would be my plan. And even if he has the nuts, so he has or at least a straight like 4-5s or 4-5 or jacks, I think we can still win a bunch of money on the river when we hit our draw.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could also have a hand like 9-10 of hearts, and I think, as you said, I just don't think there's enough fold equity. I mean, shoving's not the worst play, right? Maybe you can fold him off a hand like ace-jack, but I think with that much money, and a lot of players are just going to call it off anyways, right? So I just don't see
that's
a ton of fold equity.
That's a huge problem in those games. He should usually fold hands like ace-jack on the turn to a jam, but most aggressive racks that are not playing that well, especially when there is a lot of money in the pot, yes, they will tank for 1-2 minutes, but eventually they will just make the call because there's so much money in the pot. That's why I really dislike the shove here. When you know he's decent and he will fold some at least top pair type hands, like you mentioned, I don't mind, but a lot of the time when players check raise flop, bet turn with top pair type hands, they're just not able to fold those hands. Doesn't matter if you're super, super deep. And as you can all see, we are playing super, super deep here for a 1-3 game, where the usual buy-in is like 100 to $300-400 bucks.
Yeah, for sure. I think especially being in position, I think being out of position, I would like a check shove a bit more, because obviously in that case, we're denying a bit of equity. We're preventing him from bluffing us off on certain rivers, which would be a disaster, obviously. But when you're in position, just going for the float option, which is what I did. Seems like the best play. And then we actually do hit the flush on the river, 6 of spades, and he jams into us for about 2/3 pot. So obviously, it's a good card and a bad card, right? I'm going for the flush. I hit the flush, but of course the board pairs, and he still has all the nut flushes in his range. So it was actually not the easiest spot. But what do you think here?
Yeah, it's a super interesting decision. Like you mentioned, now we beat 4-5, we beat 10-9, and we beat ace-jack, king-jack. That's pretty good. And it also removes some combinations. So I think when the 8 paired, it would be worse, because he still has 7s and 6s, right, and jacks. So here, 6s is just not very likely, because there's only one combination left, and same story with 7-6 unit. So we are not too worried about those hands anymore. Of course, he can still have some ace-high flush draws, so some ace-high flushes on the river now. But again, a lot of ace-high flush draws are usually in Vin's calling range. A lot of people only raise hands like ace-6 in spades on the flop, and they call more often with the ace-high draws. They are way more inclined to raise combo draws like 8-9, 10-9, 4-5 of spades, those hands. So combo draws. So I still like my hand, and I think especially with this much money in the pot, even with a hand like ace-jack, some people will realize, you should not have a 6, right? The river is not changing too much. So they just rip it with ace-jack when they're aggressive. So I think, there's really no way you can get away from your hand. Sure, it's a tough situation, and sometimes your opponent will show jacks, but this is just how the game is. And often enough he will show a hand like ace-jack all the straight, because he is not reading the board properly.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, yeah. I mean, so I call, as you say, we're getting such a good price here. I mean, 3-1.
Yeah.
It's not the greatest spot, but again, if people overvalue hands like ace-jack, he could have occasionally hands like queens, maybe even aces sometimes. You see people playing these hands this way. So, good points. So I definitely agree. And I called here, just getting too good of a price. Even though we don't expect players necessarily to go too crazy when you're this deep, I think ranges are going to be wide enough. He's going to have enough worse flushes, and maybe some overplayed, hands like ace-jack, maybe some hands like even queens, kings, aces occasionally that he plays like this. So there's just no way I'm getting away. It's not ideal, but obviously just calling here when we make our hand, and luckily he had the 8-5 suited, so obviously a really good outcome for me, which kind of goes to show that, you know, he can still have hands like 9-10, sorry, not 9-10, but he'll have hands like 8-9 of spades. He could have some hands like, yeah, 4-5 of spades, 8-5 of spades, maybe in some hands like, I guess queen 9 of spades. So there's definitely some missed flush draws, or some worse flushes that he has that I beat, and then again just some worse value, and I'm just getting too good of a price. And I think the main takeaway from this hand is that, from his point of view, hands like 8-5 suited, you just don't want to be playing these hands out of position in a 3-bet pot. You know, it's one thing to open them, sure, which is still obviously outside of our ranges. I wouldn't recommend it at all, but when you get 3-bet and you're really deep stack, especially these hands, you know, these lower suited, you know, three off gap or whatever, even a hand like 7-8 suited, I would not be calling out of position often when you're this deep, because they're good for certain ranges of depth, you know, maybe like 200-300. But if you're really, really deep, when you get a lot of money in, like, you're just going to be crushed by higher flushes. So you really want to watch out in these spots. And this hand's just going to be way out of a calling range. So some to take away. And then as far as our hand goes, again, value 3-betting pre-flop. There's just so much value, right? Because, you know, if you could see his hand, you'd be value 3-betting all day, right? Just because position and then just domination. So, yeah.
I mean, this is also the reason why we want to throw those suited Broadway type hands and those suited aces, because we really make nut straights, nut flushes, second nut flushes, really strong hands. And like you mentioned, against a good player out of position, deep, it's really, really hard to play those suited connector type hands. And yeah, out of position in a suited pot, when you're deep, you have to be really, really careful, and also think about stack depth. So when you're really, really deep, it's never a good idea to pile in 400 or 500 big blinds with a weak flush, because yeah, you're usually not getting called by enough worse.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right, yeah. Well, that was fun. I think it's a pretty interesting hand, and we'll make sure we
nice hand.
Keep posting. We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, see ya.
Later.